Welcome to Caregiver SOS On Air, presented by the WellMed Charitable Foundation, with nationally known gerontologist Carol Zernial and award-winning veteran broadcaster Ron Aaron. This program provides health, wellness, and other information for caregivers who are vital to the health and well-being of so many people across our country. And now, here are your hosts, Ron Aaron and Carol Zernial.
Well, thank you so much for joining us today on Caregiver SOS On Air. I'm Ron Aaron. We're delighted to have you on board. Caregiver SOS On Air comes to you every week with a look at a variety of topics, health, mental, and beyond, dealing with caregiving and caregivers. Carol Zernial, our co-host, is here. Carol holds a master's degree in social gerontology, some 30-plus years experience in the field. She's co-chair of the Raise Family Caregiving Advisory Council and executive director of the WellMed Charitable Foundation. And Carol, we're going to invite one of our old friends back on today.
Well, we are, we love Dr. Jamie. He is, so foundational to our caregiver programs, this show, and many, many years of Take 10 with Dr. Jamie. And he is doing exciting new things. So how wonderful to have him back as a guest.
Well, let me introduce him for those who don't know, Dr. Jamie Huysman. He's the founder and executive director of Star Network Foundation, a 501c3 nonprofit dedicated to supporting survivors of toxic, abusive relationships worldwide. He also serves on the advisory board of the WellMed Charitable Foundation, as well as several other nonprofit boards and professional associations. Dr. Jamie is known around the world for his work on substance abuse as well as caregiving. And Dr. Jamie, it is a delight to have you back with us right here on Caregiver SOS On Air.
Well, it's certainly a delight to be back with you, Ron, and you, Carol. I've missed you guys and your powerful work at the Charitable Foundation and at this radio show. And it's not lost on me, Carol, that Ron had to introduce me as an old friend. Now, I don't know what he meant by old friend, but that's something we can talk about offline later.
I meant an historical relationship that is ongoing.
Oh, thank you for that clarification. Please. That's great for all caregivers out there. Don't assume.
Now, for those who don't know, even though they may be in it, what is a toxic, abusive relationship?
Well, you can almost back into it, Ron. Look at a healthy relationship, right? Let's talk about that real briefly. It's when two people meet each other in the middle. They bear witness to each other's pain. They support each other's journeys. Sometimes, of course, it's 80% on one side, 20% on the other. But basically, a good relationship, a healthy relationship comes out to be a 50-50 venture. And so if we look at that, as our foundation does, then there is 1 out of 8 people, the American Psychological Association says, that has 5 indicators, and this is a clinical thing, which is 5 characteristics out of 9 that we can then diagnose them as being toxic. Toxic is the narcissistic personality disorder, the borderline personality disorder, the histrionic and antisocial. We call the relationship disorders. So if 7 out of 8 people have the capabilities for a healthy relationship, which is having empathy, accountability, and not being transactional, but being connective, then 1 out of 8, scary number, 30 million people in America, are toxic. And that means that they had a very, very difficult childhood, that neither primary caregivers connected with them on a meaningful level, and they got frozen at an attachment stage. And so they now go on with phenomenal images to become medical directors, producers, directors. How about prime ministers? How about presidents? Because they will actually do what others will not do. They create the image, but there's nothing there. That's what a toxic individual is.
And do you know if you are one?
Interesting that you would say that, because really one of the key parts of being toxic is you really don't take ownership or accountability. It's never your problem. It's always somebody else's problem. We call that projection, and so it's very difficult for them to sit with the fact that they may be making somebody's life miserable. It's easier for them to oscillate between martyr and victim and say, it's not my problem, it's yours. So do they know? Listen, when they sit at home alone and are feeling that lost feeling of a child and there's nothing there, they may, but at that moment in time, they're going to go look for another bright, shiny object or some drink of alcohol or some way to disassociate and get the heck out of that feeling without saying, I own it.
So for those of us who are in a toxic abusive relationship, what is it? We know this person is toxic. We know it's not working. What keeps us together? Why do we stay in these relationships? And forgetting somebody that might have dementia, that might have cognitive impairment. But if we're in a relationship of any kind that is toxic abusive, why do we stay? What is the attraction?
That's the age-old question, the why. Why does it feel so comfortable? We call it the glove effect. Why do we take emotional abuse from somebody and think that we can change them and we remain in that relationship? It's such a great question. Unfortunately, for the listener, it's really a clinical answer. We actually learn at a young age what we call the trauma bond, which is like it means that literally the trauma bond is a Stockholm syndrome. And how we actually get to that Stockholm syndrome is we call intermittent reinforcement. One day your parents may give you something good. They see what you're doing for an exact behavior that the next day they may not see. So you may not be rewarded. Or worse yet, you may be penalized. The teacher may say that you can't do that. So we create the intermittent reinforcement. It's almost like feeding a chicken food one day and then taking the food away and shocking them the next day. And as a child, somehow, we could never be authentic. In the world of trauma informed care, the child could never been real. Why is that? Well, we had to be a role. We really brought sacrifices to our parents. Children should be seen and not heard. Sometimes our parents would reward us, and sometimes they would, not give us any attention at all. It is innocent abuses, but we call generational trauma passed on. So later in life, when we meet a toxic individual, we may be empathic without boundaries, or that codependent hero, lost child, scapegoat, because we developed the role in childhood. And by the way, no roles in childhood ever work in adulthood. But then it starts feeling comfortable to us, and we think we can change that person. And somehow that person is pretty much amazing in their image. And they keep us trauma bonded as well. One day they give us affection, the other day they take it away. And so it mirrors childhood. And that's why at our foundation, we created the program called Taranon, Toxic Abusive Relationship.
Right, we'll talk about that in just a minute. Hold that thought, Dr. Jamie.
It's complex post-traumatic stress disorder. How's that,
For
Carol?
those who may have just joined us, you're listening to Caregiver SOS on air. I'm Ron Aaron, along with our co-host, Carol Zernial, and we're talking with Dr. Jamie Huysman, a clinical psychologist, clinical social worker, and we're talking about his STAR network and a whole lot more. And now, Dr. Jamie, you mentioned the Stockholm Syndrome. For those who don't remember Patty Hearst and what that is all about, you identify with your captors?
Yeah, in that case, because you and I are old enough to remember Sing Q and Patty Hearst. So here was a heiress from an amazing publishing organization.
The Hearst family.
Yeah, the Hearst family, who was kidnapped, and next thing you know, she's doing bank jobs with machine guns. So she identified with her hostage taker. Again, intermittent reinforcement. And she might have had lower self-esteem. She didn't have boundaries. She maybe wasn't happy with her life. That's how cults are developed. We look at cults and we look at street gangs as being the corrective experience for things we didn't get in childhood. So Patty Hearst became, a guerrilla, a bank robber. And that's a good example, Ron, of the Stockholm syndrome, where you literally identify with your hostage taker. Number one, because you know that they can kill you at any given time. But number two, they can also bring you food at any given time.
And so you become them?
Well, you become what they want you to be. And that's how toxic individuals and narcissists work. So most codependents or non-self-aware people are cannon fodder. They're easy. They're easy for narcissists to take advantage of, and toxic people. And in the caregiving space, especially because the culture of caregiving is take care of your mom, take care of your dad, your brother, your sister. And then you might have long distance caregivers as well. Well, heck, if any of them are toxic in that whole process, it's a dark hole. We call it the tar pit. And caregivers get sucked in there without even knowing what they're getting sucked into, even though this has been their whole family, and probably they were aware without being able to identify it all their lives.
So, Dr. Jamie, this syndrome is worldwide, people suffering from trauma in abusive relationships. What does the organization that you founded, the STAR Network, do to help folks, and how does that work?
Well, it's interesting, Ron. PTSD is something we all understand well when the veterans, first responders. It's any episodic event that changes your life and just absolutely maybe destroys it at some moment. And we say trauma is not really what happens to you, it's what happens within you as a result of what happens to you. So PTSD, which was a part of our diagnostic statistical manual in the 80s, is one thing. Complex PTSD, which is we call death by a thousand cuts, which is literally childhood, is all over the world. Non-consistent, not fair, not available parents create what we call these innocent we call abuses. And those innocent things unwittingly create what we call the fight, flight, fear, and fawn response in our minds. So we created the STAR Network as a mission to support people who were in relationships with a toxic individual. And that wasn't just intimate partner abuse. That was toxic work sites. That was high conflict caregiving. That was teens and tweens. And now first responders and the military. So our mission is to support those particular people to actually reparent themselves, which we do through Tarnon, a worldwide free virtual program. Also, we want to prevent it. So we're created educational programs on obstetric units so we can teach people how not to create Frankenstein, how to really properly parent in a neurologically safe way children today.
So I've heard you describe yourself as a survivor of a toxic relationship. What was that like?
Well, actually, most of us have been. If you consider 30 million people who impact almost 300 million people, most of us have met one and gotten involved. I did. I had known all about the psychopathological word. I taught it in college, the diagnostic abilities to deal with psychopathology. But I did meet somebody many years ago, and that particular person was a phenomenal image. And at that moment in time, many years ago, she became my soulmate. But it was the image of that soulmate. And guess what? That image was what I thought love was as a child. So literally, I thought, I was supposed to calm down a person who was angry and upset and screaming and rain, because that was what I did in childhood. So when you go into these crazy relationships, you get sucked in and your whole life gets turned around because they use word salad, they use gaslighting, all the things that we read about in the paper today, and you get sucked in. And literally, they always have the upper hand. So there's a lot of suicidal ideations that happen in toxic relationships. And children, unfortunately, have to watch the poop show. And they, too, don't ever see a healthy relationship. And later on in their life, they either become like the toxic individual without intervention, or they become the doormat.
We're going to come right back to you in just a couple of moments. He's Dr. Jamie Huysman. I'm Ron Aaron. Carol Zernial, our co-host, is here. You're listening to the award-winning Caregiver SOS on air. Well, thank you so much for listening to Caregiver SOS on air. We're delighted to have you with us. We come to you every week with a discussion of an issue, a problem, some accomplishments involved in caregiving with more than 60 million caregivers across this country, but most thinking they are the Lone Rangers. We try to bring you the latest information and help that can make that job easier and more manageable. Caregiver SOS on air takes a look at trends across this country. We provide tips on how to be a better caregiver, and most importantly, where you can go for help. On Caregiver SOS on air, we try to give you what you need to make that caregiving manageable and to provide you with the help that can make your life easier. I'm Ron Aaron. Carol Zernial and I are delighted to co-host this program, and we're thrilled you've joined us on the award-winning Caregiver SOS on air podcasts available everywhere, brought to you by WellMed Charitable Foundation.
Hello, friend. Hello, friend. Really good to see you once again. Hello, friend. Hello, friend. Really good to see you once again.
Well, thank you so much for staying with us right here on the award-winning Caregiver SOS on air. Our program available on the radio in several cities in Texas and Florida as well. And we're available by podcast wherever you get your podcast. And we encourage you to listen and be part of the action on Caregiver SOS on air. Carol Zernial, our co-host, is here along with our special guest and longtime friend, Dr. Jamie Huysman, a clinical psychologist and a whole lot more, founder of and executive director of the STAR Network Foundation. And Dr. Jamie, I know Carol's got a question for you.
So Jamie, is it possible? You're the caregiver, you're in charge, you're handling the situation, to be in a toxic abusive relationship of a person who is more frail, maybe cognitively impaired, someone you may not have had a good relationship with prior to them becoming older and frail. But what does it do when the person who's in charge is still feeling like the victim of the person that they're caring for?
Oh, and those ghosts and goblins exist, Carol, so, so much. My amazing friend of mine up in Jacksonville taking care of her father right now. She always knew that there was issues in the household. Okay, the mother was toxic. The father was very much laid back and quiet and ate his anger, and so the mother ruled the roost. She created an alcoholic in one kid, a borderline in the other kid, a severe codependent in the other, because literally this is like a pinball. If you can't see and experience a fair, consistent, available childhood, this is what you take with your life. And so when you enter the world of caregiving, it becomes twice as difficult. And I remember talking to her because she's in recovery for alcoholism, has phenomenal recovery for 17 years. And she said, Jamie, stopping alcohol is nothing compared to what I have to deal with a toxic parent and deal with as a caregiver. In fact, she said, she is sucked into the vortex of those childhood traumas, whereas the parent is losing their memory, right? And yet their disposition, their temperament hasn't changed really at all. They still rule the roost. And so we basically are catering to them. And they're costing these toxic individuals are costing our system a huge amount of money because literally the world is their usher and they're the only person on stage, right? It's like a Broadway play. So we do get sucked into childhood trauma as a caregiver. And it's critically important to get good therapy, licensed therapist who's trauma trained, who understands chronic terminal and acute illness and taking care of caregivers. And they're out there. You just go to psychologytoday.com and put your zip code in and make sure you're in therapy, doing what we call emotional regulation techniques, breath work, Pilates, yoga, and being able to detach yourself from the toxic individual because they're going to suck you into that tar pit each and every time. And often the rest of the family has fled. They won't even get involved. So that poor caregiver has to take care of that one individual, which insatiably is sucking their blood and eating their marrow and just destroying them along the way. So it's happening more than we can humanly imagine, Carol, if 30 million people or APA says has a toxic, a personality that rises to the level of diagnosis.
So is there at any point, is there a place where no is the right answer? No, I can't take care of this person. Are there warning signs that say, no, you really
There are.
here?
I think that you bring up a great case again for our support system called Tar-Non, because there's only two ways to go with a toxic individual, Carol, and whether you're a caregiver or not. One is no contact, meaning absolutely none, get away, because you're not going to beat them. They're much better fighters than you'll ever be. They're reared since childhood to be that fighter. And the other is modified contact. And most caregivers have to exercise modified contact. That means really being able to lay out boundaries, also recruiting other people, and keep coming back to a fellowship program like Tar-Non, because they'll be meeting many people who were raised by toxic individuals there, whose whole life has changed. Their choices of their mates and the people they have are dictated by their childhood trauma. So I say, what happens with the toxic individuals, they're going to isolate the living daylights out of you. Keep coming back to Tar-Non. We call co-regulation. The key to trauma recovery is emotional regulation, breath work, Pilates, yoga, taking care of yourself, stress reduction, which we talk about often in caregiving, but also hanging around healthy people. Don't isolate, don't isolate, don't isolate. You've heard me say that often. It's like smoking 15 cigarettes a day, but isolation is the ally of the toxic individual. So yes, to your case, if you're going to say no and practice modified contact, make sure you have a healthy support system.
How do you know that someone is healthy?
Well, you really don't. It's kind of the elephant in the living room, Ron. I mean, most of us have enough insight and awareness to know that our childhood may have been different with this particular person. But as we started off this interview, if you will, that a healthy person does kind of meet you halfway. And that goes not just with the caree we're taking care of as a caregiver. That goes with, Joe in Ohio or my sister in California or whoever else, because any one of these people could be toxic. So if somebody's not meeting you halfway, If somebody's not showing up, bearing witness to you, trying to fix you, somebody to control you, you do have an idea of who's healthy and who's not to work with your loved one. And you need to obviously be in therapy and have this reflected back to you, or be in the fabulous Caregiver SOS support groups and having people reflect back to you what is actually going on.
Now, for those who are listening, Dr. Jamie, tell us what the Star Network does, how we can get involved, and what the costs are to participate.
Okay, wonderful. Well, we made sure it was free. How's that? Big word. Free, accessible. We think there's so much toxicity in this world and such a vital need for it. We used to be called the TAR Network, Toxic Abusive Relationship Network. But when we started our virtual support groups, and you can go to starnetwork.org and find them, or taranon.org, we decided at that point in time to change our name to be a Star Network. It was more uplifting now, not only to deal with tar, but to be a star, to walk that we call the gold carpet of stardom and taking care of yourself, your mind, your body, your spirit. So when people come into our meetings, they say, "Hey, I'm Mary, I'm a star." Or I'll come in. I don't come in as a therapist, Ron. I come in and say, "Hi, I'm Jamie, I'm a star. I'm a survivor of toxic abusive relationships." And that literally is an uplifting moment. And our meetings now are all throughout North America. We opened several weeks ago in the United Kingdom, and we have New Zealand, Australia, and the Netherlands right in our target range right now.
So the challenges are not just in this country.
Oh no, the
Abusive
attachment
relationships
disorder.
are everywhere.
Parenting is really never been something we've been taught to do, Ron. It's like caregiving. And to be perfectly honest with you, to be a good parent is three things: to be fair, consistent, and available. It's not telling your kid, "I love you" 100 million times. Heck, I have to testify in court to people who do that and are up for felonies. And you have to understand, we've never been taught proper parenting, neuroparenting. I always say no child wants to be evil. Okay. So in the East, where you have a high misogynist kind of group where women are kind of marginalized, you'll see a higher incidence of attachment disorders. Why? Because primary caregivers will push the female away in lieu of wanting a male. So it's a parenting style. And you see it in Russia, you'll see it in India, you see it in China, you see it in the United States. You name it. It's parenting 101. And no matter where we're at, what culture we're at, the attachment disorder and narcissistic abuse exists.
And where do you get help?
Well, we're the only ones right now. We have a virtual trauma network that we're now scaling, and we have organizations that are actually renaming it, and it says powered by Star Network. But right now, if you want help and you're listening to this, definitely go to Taranon, TARANON.org. Sign up for our meetings. We'll send you text, emails. You can come to our Instagram. We have 165,000 people waiting for you there that tells the story in animation. It's Star Network Foundation. You can also even come to see me. We just started that on our Survivors Day, and that's drjamie.star. And there I have about 50,000 people, and we provide content. That's the awareness side. Taranon's the actual transformative side, where we take our lives back. And guess what the byproduct is, Ron? Self-love and then collective love. So the only way we're going to find peace on earth is to reparent ourselves.
Now we have a couple minutes left, and before we leave, I want to come back to what Carol said, and you're quite aware of, where you end up caring for someone who has been abusive to you, who has been over-controlling, dominant, and are there ways you can't fix them, you can't change them? How do you fix yourself in that situation?
You definitely have to put yourself first in this. It's very difficult because probably you haven't done it your whole lifetime, right? We always say you're doomed to recreate your dramas and traumas until you intervene on them. And we've just started learning how the brain works in this world of trauma in the 1990s. So believe me when I tell you, we're just becoming aware through our autocrats, through presidents, through the government, what these people are like. The vital thing that we have to do for our lives is to reparent ourselves, to acknowledge, to become aware that maybe as dysfunctional things, children should be seen and not heard, and things happen in our childhood that created this brain that now needs to be reparent. We often say at the Star Network, if you don't break the family trauma will break you. So drawing boundaries, going no contact, bringing in other people and strategies, coming to taranon.org to learn a lot of these strategies, or coming to our website and learning about some subject matter experts around the world is a first step.
Dr. Jamie, I want to thank you so much. Carol, you get the last word.
Well, I just, hope that people will recognize that, or stop to think about the relationships they're in, get help if they need it. life's hard enough without carrying the weight of a toxic, abusive relationship.
Thank you. Carol Zernial, our co-host. Dr. Jamie Huysman, delighted to have you on board again. And you find the Star Network Foundation, where he has been the founder and executive director, is there for you. I'm Ron Aaron. Thank you so much for joining us on the award-winning Caregiver SOS On Air. The executive producer for Caregiver SOS On Air is Daniel Calderon. The producer is Sharice Pendleton. And the associate producer is Catherine Oglesby. We'll see you next week on Caregiver SOS On Air.
You've been listening to Caregiver SOS On Air, an exclusive presentation of the WellMed Charitable Foundation. We welcome emails with suggestions and comments on this program at radio@wellmed.net. Join co-hosts Carol Zernial and Ron Aaron next week for more on caregiving, improving the health and well-being of caregivers and their care recipients everywhere. For more on caregiving and podcasts of our programs, visit caregiversos.org.